Admiral Vraal Frex leaned back in his command chair, its obsidian frame glinting faintly under the light of 100 holographic projections. Outside the viewport stretched the smoldering remains of a human colony, a handful of crude habitats cracked open, their atmospheres venting into the void like faint gray ribbons. It was barely a skirmish, more like pest control. "Pathetic," murmured one of his lieutenants, a young officer whose crimson uniform had not yet seen a true war. He gazed at the drifting wreckage as though expecting something dramatic, some defiant counterattack. Nothing came. Vraal let the silence linger before answering, his tone flat, amused. "They squeal, they burn, and then they scatter. Always the same with these frontier mammals." He tapped a control, and the display shifted, offering tactical readouts of the other colonies under their protection. Protection was what the Empire called it, though everyone knew better. Another officer chuckled softly. "Do they even call this resistance? Our drones handle the entire grid in under an hour." A third officer added, voice dripping with boredom, "They make interesting noises when the habitats decompress. The children especially, like wind through hollow reeds." The bridge erupted with low laughter. Vraal allowed himself the faintest smile, the kind that never reached his eyes. His crew needed this bravado, this sense of inevitability. Let them laugh. It kept the illusion of control alive. Yet behind his expressionless stare, Vraal cataloged details the others ignored. The humans had fired back, not effectively, not enough to matter, but enough to suggest they were learning. There had been coordination this time. Signals intercepted. Fleets moved with purpose, not panic. Like a prey animal realizing the trap too late, but realizing nonetheless. It was nothing. And yet, the Admiral dismissed the thought. A single successful ambush wouldn't save them. The Empire's fleet spanned half the galaxy. Their technology was centuries ahead. Entire species had knelt before the banner of the Dominion without a single shot fired. The humans would join them. They always did. Still, he remembered the last transmission from the colony before silence swallowed it, a woman's voice steady, unbroken even as fire consumed her station. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot. Curious creatures, these humans. Fragile, talkative, defiant to the end." The doors to the command deck parted with a hiss. A messenger strode in, armor scuffed from long travel. He bowed briefly before speaking. "Admiral, confirmation from High Command. The Council approves escalation. Target designation, Cradle World." The words fell like stones in still pond. Even the officers who moments ago laughed at dying children shifted uneasily. "Earth," Vraal said. "Not a question." "Yes, Admiral." The youngest officer smirked, eager to restore the earlier mood. "End it before it starts. Burn their nest, the rest will scatter." Another added, "Crush the cradle, and the species breaks. It always works." Always. Vraal studied the tactical projection of the blue-green sphere, now marked in red. A single homeworld carrying all their myths, their history, their stubborn sense of identity. Destroy that, and the war ended before it began. The logic was flawless. It always was. He gave the order. Fleet movements rippled outward across the holomap like dark wings spreading. Thousands of warships adjusting course, engines flaring as they bent toward Sol. The operation would take days to assemble, but once begun, it would end in hours. "History will not remember their names," said the young lieutenant, almost cheerfully. Vraal did not answer, because deep inside, buried beneath decades of victories and the Dominion's iron doctrines, something stirred. Not fear. Not yet. But something colder. The memory of that last human broadcast, the defiance in it. No pleading. No surrender. Like a storm warning ignored because the sky still looked clear. The Council sent final confirmation moments later, all ceremonial flourish stripped away. By authority of the Dominion, neutralize Sol 3. Exterminate resistance. The words blinked across the display, like a death sentence signed in advance. Preparations began instantly. Engineering crews calculated bombardment yields. Tactical officers drafted surrender demands in 17 languages, though no one expected humans to answer them. Young pilots boasted of how quickly they bring Earth to heal. One officer joked about mounting fragments of human monuments on his wall. Another wondered aloud if Earth's oceans would boil faster than its cities burned. Their laughter grated this time. Vraal watched the blue-green sphere spinning slowly on the display. He had seen countless worlds die. Forest planets reduced to ash, desert worlds cracked open for minerals, ocean worlds left steaming under orbital fire. Empires rose and fell under the Dominion's march, and the stars themselves seemed to bend before its will. And yet, something in the human silence troubled him. Not submission, not panic, silence. The younger officers mistook it for weakness. They always did. But Vraal had commanded too many wars to believe the first explanation offered by arrogance. He had seen proud species bluff with false bravado. He had seen terrified ones beg for peace they couldn't win. But he had never seen a prey species go this still, as though waiting for something. The invasion timetable arrived within the hour, fleets converging in 3 waves, orbital strikes planned to decapitate defenses before ground forces landed. A single planetary day to erase a civilization. The Council expected compliance, as they always did. Vraal gave the final authorization. The bridge lights dimmed as the fleet's engines came online, a predator's heartbeat rising before the kill. And still, that quiet unease coiled tighter in his mind. Perhaps it was nothing. Perhaps the humans were exactly what they appeared to be, another primitive people standing before the inevitable tide of history, too stubborn to kneel, too weak to matter. Perhaps. But as the fleet cut through the dark toward Sol, Admiral Vraal Threx watched the spinning blue world and wondered, for the first time in many years of conquest, whether this victory would cost more than the Dominion understood. Because in his gut, honed by wars, betrayals, and the slow death of empires, he felt it. This wasn't going to be like the others. Not at all. The Dominion fleet arrived at the edge of Sol system in precise formation, a metal storm blotting out the stars as it advanced. Engines burned like falling suns, carrier wings unfolding like serrated knives. The home world of humanity rotated slowly below, blue and green and fragile-looking in the void. No resistance waited at the perimeter. No defensive fleet, no planetary shields flickering to life. Just silence. Admiral Vraal Threx sat rigid on the command deck, watching sensor readings stream past. Earth's transmissions had ceased hours ago. Civilian frequencies went dark one by one, as though the species had collectively drawn breath and held it. His officers muttered about surrender, about fear. Vraal wasn't so sure. He had studied prey worlds before. They screamed, they begged, they made frantic last stands. These humans had gone quiet. Approaching orbit, reported the helm officer. Open comms, Vraal ordered. A burst of static answered, then a voice. Human. Male. Come. This is Earth Command, it said. No tremor. No panic. You have crossed into restricted space. Withdraw immediately. On the bridge, officers snorted and exchanged smirks. The voice might as well have been asking them to please mind the flowers while trampling the garden. One young lieutenant leaned toward his console. Shall I return fire? Vraal held up a hand. Not yet. Repeat, the human voice said evenly. This is your first and only warning. That drew open laughter. Warning, someone muttered. Do they not see what stands over them? Vraal was about to give the order when the lead destroyer, in orbit, simply ceased to exist. One moment a warship 3 kilometers long gliding past Earth's atmosphere, the next a blossom of silent light scattering its atoms across the void. No missile trails. No energy signatures. Just gone. Bridge silence crashed down, like gravity. Sensor malfunction? An officer asked, voice tight. The second destroyer died before the question finished leaving his mouth. Then the third. No launch signatures. No visible weapons. Just sudden, surgical annihilation. Panic edged the bridge crew's voices now, scrambling for telemetry, scanning for fleets, cloaked mines, planetary guns. Nothing made sense. Then the human voice returned, unhurried. Withdraw. This is your final warning. Vraal felt something cold slide down his spine. He had seen countless sieges. He knew the rhythms of conquest, the false bravado, the desperate resistance, the inevitable fall. But this wasn't resistance. This was preparation. His tactical officer finally found something, orbital signatures not above the planet, but beyond it. Dozens of them. No hundreds. Lurking in asteroid shadows, hidden behind moons, silent as ice. Not civilian stations. Not crude missile barges. Warships. And they were moving. Multiple contacts inbound, the officer stammered. The Dominion fleet adjusted weapons, engines flaring as intercept patterns unfolded, like a killing net. Dominion doctrine depended on superiority of numbers, speed, and terror. No enemy had ever outmaneuvered them in open battle. Until now, the human fleet emerged from darkness without flare or flourish, as though it had been there all along, waiting. Sleek vessels cut from black alloy, their configurations alien even to alien eyes, no wasted lines, no banners, no signatures of empire or ego. The first wave hit before the Dominion fleet finished forming ranks. Electromagnetic pulses swallowed communications. Kinetics ripped through Dominion shields with impossible precision, slugs fired at fractions of light speed, silent until impact turned them into newborn suns. Human ships moved like predators, never closing too far, never lingering for return fire. Every attack crippled something vital, engines, weapons, reactors, before vanishing behind jamming screens and decoy swarms. It wasn't war. It was extermination with the volume turned low. Vraal gripped the armrest as status reports poured in, carriers lost, escorts spinning into gravity wells, whole squadrons blind and deaf. Impossible. Where do they get this technology? Demanded the lieutenant beside him, face pale under the bridge lights. No one answered. Vraal watched another Dominion cruiser rupture under railgun fire, its remains spiraling like autumn leaves into Earth's gravity well. His chest tightened, not with fear, not yet, but with recognition. He had seen this before. Not in space. Not in his wars. In history archives. Old wars fought on mud and sea and shattered cities. Wars where humanity burned itself and kept fighting anyway. Wars where surrender came late and victory left only ruins behind. The reports reached him minutes later. These human weapons were not new. Some were refinements of technologies abandoned by the rest of the galaxy centuries ago. Kinetic weapons, stealth tactics, electronic warfare, but honed into perfection, wielded with machine precision. The Dominion had grown used to enemies begging for peace after the first bombardment. These humans had spent their silence preparing to kill gods. On the bridge, panic rose as Dominion formations crumbled. Officers demanded retreat. Others demanded orbital strikes on the planet itself. Vraal ignored them all. He was watching the human fleet adapt in real time, strikes growing sharper, faster, almost anticipatory. As though every Dominion tactic had been studied for years. This wasn't desperation. This was orchestration. The human voice returned once more, soft as snowfall. Leave now. Do not return. Not shouted. Not triumphant. Promised. Vraal stared at Earth turning below, blue oceans glinting under sunlight, clouds swirling above green continents. It looked fragile, vulnerable, a single world facing an empire spanning half a galaxy. But it wasn't afraid. And for the first time in his long career of conquest, Vraal Threx felt the first edge of fear touch his thoughts like a knife tip resting against the skin. Because wars like this didn't begin with victory. They began with warnings. And the Dominion had not been listening. The Dominion War Council met in the capital's high chamber under the glow of 1,000 artificial suns. Senators argued beneath towering spires of glass and steel, voices cracking with panic as reports from Sol System cascaded across their holoscreens. Fleet losses, comm relays gone dark, entire sectors cut off from command. "This is absurd," shouted Senator Krail, slamming his clawed hand against the table. "A single primitive world cannot destroy Dominion fleets." "They can," Admiral Vraal said evenly from the center of the chamber. His uniform still carried the scorch marks of the retreat from Earth's orbit, the first retreat he had ordered in his decades of service. The senators glared at him as though the fault lay not in their fleets or their hubris, but in his delivery of unwelcome facts. Krail sneered. "You expect us to believe these humans wield technology rivaling the Dominion? From a backwater system barely charted." "Not rivaling," Vraal said. "Surpassing." The word dropped into the chamber like a blade. Hollow feeds played silently behind him, Dominion cruisers tearing apart under invisible barges, communications dying mid-transmission, ships lost to gravity wells after precise strikes crippled their engines. No speeches from the enemy. No demands. Just methodical dismantling. Vraal let them watch before speaking again. They knew our formations, our timing, our weaknesses. Every countermeasure we attempted, they anticipated before it began. Some senators shifted uneasily. Others scoffed. "A lucky ambush," Krail snapped. "Next wave will." "There will be no next wave," Vraal cut in, voice sharp enough to still the room. "Not until you understand what we are facing." Silence fell. It wasn't defiance in his tone, but something colder. Vraal activated a new holo display. It showed fragments of intercepted human transmissions, footage of wars fought long before humanity reached the stars. Trenches filled with mud and gas. Skies blackened by bombers. Cities burning under nuclear fire. Soldiers advancing through ruins with dead eyes and steady hands. These are their own wars, Vraal said. Not against us. Against each other. For centuries. Millennia. One senator frowned. Savages. Survivors, Vraal corrected. They wage total war as instinct. No surrender until nothing remains. They have burned their own world and rebuilt it more than once. And now they are united. That word carried weight the council could feel. United. The Dominion itself was a patchwork of conquered systems, half-loyal governors and client species held in line by fear and tradition. Humanity, by contrast, showed no internal fractures. No hesitation. Krail waved a dismissive hand. Old history. They cannot stand against the full Dominion fleet. Vraal almost pitted him. Senator, the fleet you speak of no longer exists in full. Reports continued scrolling behind them. Shipyards destroyed in distant sectors, fuel depots vanishing in sudden fireballs, supply lines severed by surgical strikes. They are not fighting our fleets head-on, Vraal said. They are dismantling the Empire itself, piece by piece. The council erupted again, accusations, denials, demands for retaliation. Some senators wanted orbital bombardments of Earth cities. Others insisted on peace negotiations before more systems fell silent. Through it all, Vraal stood unmoving, watching fear hollow out the voices of men and women who had ruled half a galaxy for generations. Because he had seen the pattern forming now. Dominion fleets chased ghosts while human forces struck where defenses were weakest. Every counterattack arrived one step too late. It was not conquest. It was dissection. And fear was spreading faster than lost reports. Civilian worlds whispered of human fleets appearing without warning, striking military targets, then vanishing like smoke. Trade convoys stopped running. Governors requested additional troops to maintain order as riots began over rumors the Dominion could no longer protect its own citizens. Vraal requested emergency powers to coordinate defenses across sectors. The council refused, too fractured by politics to agree on anything beyond its own survival. He left the chamber certain the Empire's fate was no longer in their hands. On the command carrier returning to the front, Vraal studied human tactics with a growing chill in his blood. They wasted nothing. Not shots. Not words. Not time. Every engagement ended before Dominion forces even understood how it began. And always the same transmission followed. Leave. Do not return. No threats. No boasts. As if humanity considered the war already over, and the Dominion simply hadn't accepted it yet. On the third day, another 10 Dominion sectors went silent. Communications blackouts. Shipyards gone. Patrol fleets missing. Panic finally reached the homeworlds. Senators demanded answers Vraal didn't have. Governors recalled forces from frontier systems, leaving entire borders unguarded. Refugees began fleeing core worlds for deep space, convinced humanity was coming for them next. But humanity wasn't coming for civilians. Only for the Dominion itself. Vraal watched footage of another shipyard imploding under kinetic strikes. Workers had been evacuated beforehand. Every time. No civilians targeted. No unnecessary deaths. It wasn't mercy. It was precision. Humanity wasn't fighting for survival anymore. They were dismantling a rival. The Dominion fleet mustered for one final defense around the central shipyards near the capital itself. Dozens of capital ships, carrier wings, defense stations. Enough firepower to repel anything short of a full-scale invasion. They never saw the human fleet arrive. Wormhole signatures bloomed across the system like opening scars. Human warships poured through, not in grand formations but in swarms, fast, silent, coordinated beyond anything Dominion tacticians could follow. Defense stations died first. Carriers next. Command ships last. Hours into the battle, Dominion forces still hadn't landed a decisive hit. Vraal stood on the bridge, watching his empire unravel in real time, and felt the truth settle like ice in his chest. The Dominion was no longer at war. It was already defeated, and humanity was only deciding how thorough the ending would be. Admiral Vraal Frex watched the last defense fleet die in silence. The command deck lights flickered under power fluctuations, each one a faint echo of another Dominion ship breaking apart somewhere beyond the atmosphere. Wreckage drifted across the stars like metallic snow. The human fleet surrounded the Dominion capital in perfect formation. Not a single vessel drifted out of line. No messages blared across open channels demanding surrender, no ultimatums, no threats. They simply waited, engines glowing faintly, guns locked on the planet below with surgical precision. The Dominion Senate had collapsed hours ago, panic spreading like infection through its marble halls. Some senators fled the planet on private shuttles. Others barricaded themselves in chambers with ceremonial guards who would be dead before the day ended. Entire planetary networks carried only fragments of a chaos. Riots in the lower cities, fires sweeping across the industrial rings, civilians staring upward at the encircling fleet that did not fire. Vraal stood at the command deck windows, the weight of his uniform like chain mail across his shoulders. He had once believed in the Dominion as eternal, inevitable. Now he watched eternity unravel like rotted fabric. The human fleet moved at last. Not toward the cities. Not toward civilians. They struck only at the remaining defense grid, a coordinated sequence so fast and precise Vraal almost admired it. Orbital cannons cracked apart one by one. Defense satellites shattered into molten fragments. Planetary shields fell with a soundless flicker across the atmosphere. The capital lay exposed. Still no bombardment followed. Instead, a single transmission came through, calm, measured, without triumph. This war is over. Stand down. The voice belonged to no one the Dominion recognized. No titles. No rank. Just words spoken with the quiet certainty of history writing itself in real time. On the bridge, officers looked to Vraal. Some wanted orders to fight to the last. Others waited for permission to surrender. He gave neither, because he understood what the silence around those words meant. Humanity wasn't demanding submission. They were offering it like a choice. The Dominion Senate finally surrendered at dusk. What remained of it, anyway? The message carried across every frequency. The Empire yielded unconditionally to human forces. Not because of orbital fire, not because of civilian casualties, there had been almost none, but because the Dominion no longer had a military left to fight with. When the guns fell silent, Vraal expected occupation troops to descend, executions to begin, monuments to be toppled under the banners of a new empire. That was what the Dominion would have done. Instead, humanity landed only enough forces to secure weapons caches and disarm remaining fleets. No palaces burned. No officials dragged into public squares. It unsettled him more than conquest would have. The new human governor, if that word even applied, arrived without fanfare. A single diplomatic vessel touched down on the capital's landing platforms where Dominion emperors once held victory parades. Vraal was summoned to meet them. He expected a soldier or politician. Instead, a woman stepped from the ship, wearing no rank insignia at all. Her expression carried the calm of someone who had already seen too much war to waste emotion on it anymore. "You commanded their fleets," she said without introduction. "I did," Vraal admitted. "Then you understand what comes next." He studied her for a long moment. Occupation. Annexation. Her faint smile held neither cruelty nor warmth. Administration. Until your worlds can govern themselves without threatening anyone else. The words cut deeper than any execution order could have. The Dominion reduced from empire to supervised territory in a single sentence. "Why spare US?" Vraal asked before he could stop himself. Her eyes held something he couldn't read. Pity, perhaps. Or warning. Because this war was never about revenge. It was about ending the need for one. She left him standing there as planetary broadcasts announced the terms. Dominion fleets disarmed, leadership dissolved, systems reorganized under joint councils monitored by human envoys. No slavery, no purges, no tribute demanded. Just control. Quiet, absolute, undeniable control. Weeks passed before the riots ended, before trade routes reopened under human supervision, before governors pledged loyalty to the new order because there was no one left to pledge it to. Vraal watched it all like a man drifting through the ruins of his own house, hearing strangers deciding what walls to rebuild and what rooms to seal forever. Human fleets never left orbit, not because they needed to stay, because the sight of them reminded every world what defiance would cost. One evening, Vraal stood on the same balcony where emperors once declared new conquests. Now he looked out over a city patrolled by joint security forces wearing both Dominion and human insignia, the banners of Empire replaced by neutral crests of provisional councils. The woman approached quietly beside him. "Will they ever be free again?" he asked without turning. "They will," she said. "Just not the same way." He almost laughed at the precision of it. Freedom under supervision. Peace at gunpoint. A future shaped not by the empire that ruled for centuries, but by the species that ended it in a single season. Above them, the human fleet remained like a second sky of metal stars. Watching. Waiting. "Why?" he asked finally. She seemed to consider the question, as though humanity itself hadn't decided until now. "Because we were asleep before you came. Fighting ourselves. Divided. Content with one small world." Her gaze lifted toward the ships above. "You ended that." Vraal felt the weight of it then. Not just defeat, not just Empire's end, but the birth of something far larger than the Dominion had ever been. This war hadn't awakened humanity's anger. It had awakened its ambition. The woman left him on the balcony as night fell over the capital. Vraal watched the stars brighten one by one across the dark, knowing most now held human ships in orbit above former Dominion worlds. For the first time in centuries, no empire ruled the galaxy. Something else did. Something quieter. Something worse. Because empires ended. But whatever humanity had become since the day the Dominion invaded Earth looked like it intended to last forever.